You like to dance and you like to groove. That means everybody's got to move. Just shake your hips and flip your hair and throw your hands up in the air. Oh, now everybody starts to dance. Feel the rhythm in your hands. Count to 10 and you got romance. Just take a chance and move. Up and down, you've got the groove. Just dance around, there ain't no rules.
Happy Devil's Tuesday. This is At the Point, talking about NHL moves. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Bruce Zeman, NHL analyst extraordinaire, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Oh, yeah, coming to you live from the Primetime Radio studios as we're listening DJ Shelley's Move. Yeah, you can get it on SoundCloud. Yep, my good friend and good friend of the podcast, DJ Shelley. That's her single from a couple of years ago called Move, as we're talking about NHL moves, because there is a particular article that seemingly got, kind of went unnoticed, Bruce, but we'll talk about NHL moves. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But, Bruce, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Sam. It's great to be with you. Happy Tuesday. One of my favorite times of the year. We're about 6 weeks or so away from the NHL trade deadline, which I believe is March 7th. And stuff's starting to happen. And, boy, it is a busy Tuesday. There's a lot going on out there and a lot to talk about.
Lots to talk about, and I think starting on the top big topic is blockbuster trades. We saw what happened with the three-way trade just less than a week ago with Colorado, Carolina, and Chicago. Will there be more blockbuster trades?
I think there's going to be, but what I've been following specifically with that blockbuster trade has kind of been a little bit of the fallout from that blockbuster trade. Mikko Rantanen, really the centerpiece of that big deal. As you said, Colorado and Chicago swapping players. And, boy, an article came out that I was reading this morning that Mikko Rantanen was willing to take, quote, significantly less to stay in Colorado. And that didn't happen. He's now a Carolina Hurricane, and one has to wonder what went on there, because multiple reports have come out that he was blindsided by this trade, and multiple stories saying how upset he was when it actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, is this a classic case of bluffing and the agent going over the top and actually backfired? Do you think that could have been the case? Because sometimes we see that in sports. You're talking about the rumors were $14 million a year. Maybe they kind of overdid it there, and Joe Sakic got scared off.
Well, maybe that's the case, but what's interesting is I haven't, or at least I can't recall a situation where a player. I mean, listen, I think players sometimes are upset when they get traded, and I think you hear, disappointment sometimes, but can you recall, you've been doing this a long time like I have, can you recall a player coming out and saying that I was willing to take significantly less to stay in a place? I mean, that certainly can't make the Colorado fan base too happy.
No. Could be strategy, but I kind of believe that was a genuine, truthful statement. It's rare you hear it right after a trade. Sometimes you hear that 15, 20 years later after a player retires, where you get kind of the behind the scenes. But in real time, to say that, it's almost like kind of, well, you hit me with the door on the way out, I'm going to hit you back with that same door on the way out. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but obviously he's not happy, and now he's in Carolina. And now will he be an unrestricted free agent after this season?
He's in the final year of a 6-year, $55.5 million contract that he signed with Colorado in 2019. He can become an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. And there's a lot of talk as to whether or not Carolina will be able to sign him or whether he's going to go the free agent route. One of the other things that kind of surprised me about this is I was just kind of wondering, since he said that he was blindsided, I wonder if his people had a chance to talk about maybe, signing an extension before that happened, but it doesn't sound like that happened.
Yeah. I don't know what went wrong there. Maybe Joe Sakic is thinking of the future, possibly sacrificing him now just to keep that cap space with the core group that they have there. But he was the core group as far as I'm concerned. And you don't know what's going in the mind of Joe Sakic. I mean, if negotiations, again, I kind of think that agents bluff all the time. I mean, if you want to look right now with the New York Mets, and I know it's another sport, but New York Mets and Pete Alonso, and there were so many numbers thrown out, and that free agency is just dragging on. And then you're hearing about Scott Boras, who's a super agent. And, sometimes I think agents are looking for the bottom line where the player just wants to play the sport and in this case wants to play hockey and would have taken less, but you don't really show those cards during negotiations either.
Well, it sounds like that the Avalanche had an internal number that they didn't want to go over, especially given Nathan McKinnon, who I believe is making like something like 12.6 a year. And some of the numbers I had heard tossed around from Renton was 11.75, and it just never got to that. And so now he's in Carolina, and remains to be seen whether they'll be able to sign him. I believe he's got a couple of good friends on the Hurricanes, so that is certainly going to help. But the fallout from that trade, I just don't recall having seen a player come out and say, I was willing to take a lot less to stay there. I mean, I think part of the shock is that he from what I've read, he really was not expecting this. But, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes, and whether, Colorado was in on the JT Miller and Elias Peterson sweepstakes, and whether, that didn't come to fruition, so they went this way. But it's a busy time of year, and I think, to answer your question, I think it is the first of many deals that we're going to see. I think there's a couple of teams that could pull the trigger on some big deals. I mean, listen, you and I were talking off air that there's a story that's on NHL.com this afternoon about an interview with the Canucks, one of the Canucks presidents, Jim Rutherford, saying that if they continue their rebuild, if they decide to go the total rebuild route, that anyone is tradable, including the Canucks captain, Quinn Hughes, who's in his second year as captain. And I just don't see any way that the Canucks trade him. But if we saw what happened with Rantanen, I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, I'm reading that article right now. I'm trying to find that quote. But it basically says, we're talking about the two of our top players, Rutherford said. Certainly our two best forwards. I think he's referring to JT Miller and who's the other
Peterson.
guy? Peterson.
Elias Peterson.
Yeah. It can be really tough on a franchise, not only present but into the future. When you're planning on peaking this team into a contending team, and then you find out that that's just not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen with the group we have right now, then you have to put together a new plan. With that new plan, I don't see it happening. Moving on from Quinn Hughes, I mean, you're going to get tremendous value if you trade Quinn Hughes right now. If you're going to blow it up, But do you think the Vancouver Canucks ownership group will allow Rutherford to blow it up? I mean,
Well, I don't think you're going to make a trade like that without the buy-in of the people at the very top. Because if you were to trade him, you're right, you'll get probably top value, but at what cost? Because as soon as you trade him, you're going to have a gaping hole in your defense. I mean, unless you were to, get back a Cale Makar or a Roman Yossi or some other defenseman that's at the top of his game. Something like that's an organizational, that's a total organizational redirection to make a trade like that. And you would have to, I mean, I'm just going to use this. I mean, you'd have to get somebody like a Jack Hughes back for his brother, just, someone at that level. And again, to any team that's going to trade for him or be a trade partner, I mean, you're going to give up. I'll just use New Jersey because that's the team that you and I both follow. If you were going to make a trade for that, you're going to give up someone like a Nico Hischier and a Seamus Casey. That's who you're going to give up for a player like that. And I think you'd really have to think about that. But I can't see Vancouver doing that. I mean, even doing, if they were to go the route of a complete rebuild, I would think he would be the cornerstone of your rebuild. But to just kind of transition here to one of our other topics, that situation in Vancouver is not good, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
what does Vancouver need when they do a rebuild? They're going to need picks. Or are they doing a rebuild or a reload? That's the question I want to know.
But again, Sam, here's my... So you're going to... Let's just say you're doing a complete rebuild, okay? Who are you going to start with? I mean, I can't think of anybody on that roster that would be more untouchable than him. You know, I mean, if you look at the New Jersey roster, if you know, for example, I mean, to me, and you don't know what goes on in the room and what players talk about, but I mean, if somebody offered you, let me give you a hypothetical trade. If they called you up and said, okay, Mr. Wu, as the GM of the New Jersey Devils, we're going to give you can have Cale Makar, who's in his prime, all right? But we want Nico Hischier. Are you going to make that trade?
It all depends.
But that's my point. I mean, as much as we, now talking as an analyst, not as a fan, I mean, I think if you went through every roster, we should do this sometime. That'd be a good topic. If you went through, like, each team and came up with the absolutely untouchables on that team, like, I think if you, even looking at the New Jersey roster, I think if you said who is absolutely not going anywhere, it's probably Jack Hughes, maybe his brother, and unless you get offered the farm, probably Nico. But other than that, I mean, if someone put together, some sick package, you're going to have to pay for it. It's kind of like when the Devils were going after Markstrom. You're going to have to give up a premier talent. I mean, the Devils did a pretty good job bringing him here finally, but man, that's I can't see Vancouver doing that.
Quinn Hughes going into his prime. I mean, we're talking prime, which means you're going to pay a premium when he's going into his prime. Now, the Devils are actually in a unique situation here, having two of the three Hughes brothers, and, would they unite the three from a marketing standpoint? Because, the Devils marketing right now, there's a huge focus on that department. They would love it. They would love it. To have three brothers on one team and all three of them being all-stars. One potentially, or two potentially Norris Trophy candidates in 1 year, one day. That'd be significant. But what is it worth to New Jersey Devils? But to get Quinn Hughes, any other team, I think any other team in the NHL would love Quinn Hughes and would pay a premium. The Devils would have to offer future picks. Also, they would have to offer Zeman Nemec as well. They would also have to offer maybe a Dawson Mercer as well. And maybe 2 first-rounders, Nemec and Dawson Mercer for Quinn Hughes, who is locked up. By the way, the cap's going up next year. And that would actually solidify your blue line for many, many years.
I'd make that trade.
I would make it too. Well, but would Vancouver make it? Because I'm sure another team would offer much more for Quinn
You
Hughes.
think so?
They might. They might. But then again, the only knock on Quinn Hughes is he's not your prototypical 6'5", 235-pound D guy either. You know. So I don't know. And he's left-handed as well.
I mean,
Not
he's
that-
25 years old. He's coming into his prime.
Yep.
And, 410 games played, 389 points. But I mean, if Vancouver comes to you and says Dawson, Mercer, Nemec, and a couple of draft picks, I make that trade tomorrow.
Okay.
But we'll see. I mean, I was very surprised to read that article, and but I think there's some other trades coming. I mean, the Islanders are rumored to be doing some things. The Maple Leafs, and let's not forget in that Rantanen trade, Taylor Hall also went to Carolina. Now he's not the player he once was, but he certainly could do some stuff in the playoffs for them. So that could be another piece that turns out to be good for them.
Yeah. Definitely. But I think Taylor Hall, I mean, he's a different point of his career. He could be an added value bonus for Carolina Hurricanes in terms of depth. But I think right now, I think the Carolina Hurricanes, it's kind of all in. All in. I'm surprised with the amount of veterans they lost. But again, they didn't tie themselves up into back contracts. I think the Carolina Hurricanes strategy is have an out at any time with some of these players. So, with Rod Brindamore there, I mean, it's a very well-coached team, very consistent. I think their only Achilles heel this entire time was elite goaltending. Really, everything else about the team is very, very good.
Yeah, and for Carolina, don't forget, Sam, it's not a given that they're going to be able to sign him. I think Rantanen is still pretty shocked that this whole thing happened. And if I were him, if he was sent to a place that he wasn't expecting to go to, and he did okay, I think it's a given that he's going to explore the free agent market. And I mean, listen, anything's possible. You and I have seen that. But I mean, maybe Colorado comes to its senses, if you don't think that they're at their senses now, and maybe they offer him something this summer. But I mean, it sounds like there's some bad feelings there right now.
Yeah, the shock of getting traded, and if you're blindsided, would you want to go back? And that's something, again, I mean, that would be an amazing story for the Colorado Avalanche because they get a lot in return. Without really
it's happened before. We've seen that happen on a couple of occasions where a player's gotten dealt and then gone back. It's usually not for anything, not a player of that caliber, but they really, the Hurricanes have got to make sure that they can get him signed, and I'm not sure that that's a given, but we'll see.
But it does open up a tremendous amount of cap space for them, I would think. If he were to walk, so.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the other thing, too, and I'm not a cap expert on this, but I believe now that the Hurricanes own his rights, I believe that until whatever his free agency date is, I think that they're the only team that can offer him an 8-year deal. Everybody else can only offer him a 7-year deal. So, that's something else. But he's one of the premier players in the league. It's a big trade, and I think it may just be the beginning of the free agency madness, as we like to say.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina can offer him a max contract and negotiate that in a trade with another team. But for Rantanen, the incentive there is I got a guaranteed contract, and I'm going to a team that, maybe could potentially be of his choosing. So to get that 8th year. So it certainly can happen.
Well, if I'm him right now, I'm going to my agent and saying, listen, I'm not happy about this trade, and I'm not even that I'm not happy, just that I wasn't expecting this, and let's explore what's out there. I mean, I think that's more likely than anything now.
Yeah, definitely. Other blockbuster trades you think that might happen?
My God, there's so many teams that could add a player. I mean, the Maple Leafs are out there, the Capitals are out there, the Devils are out there. One of the stories that came up earlier this week that I've been following is there's a report that I saw in a couple of places that, and I don't know if this would fall under blockbuster category, but the Devils are supposedly very interested in Kyle Palmieri, bringing him back. I mean, he would certainly be a good addition to the team. One of the other rumors that for whatever reason will not die, it just won't die, is Sidney Crosby potentially going to the Colorado Avalanche.
Isn't that something?
Well, I mean, listen, if Gretzky can be traded, anybody can be traded, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a number of teams that really need to do some things. I mean, there's been rumblings that the Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres are going to have fire sales. And, if you look at any analyst and they've got their, top 30 trade board, there's a whole bunch of, Buffalo Sabres up there. There's a bunch of Penguins up there. And so for a contender, you're going to make a move. But it's that time of year we're going to pay a cost for that move.
Yeah. Oh, well, how about the Logan Thompson extension?
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal, too. The Capitals signed him to, I believe it's a 6-year extension. I'm just looking at my notes right here. I had everything ready, and of course...
it always happens on live air, Bruce. You
it does.
Know that.
It does. It happens all the time. So the Capitals signed him to an extension, and he's in his first season with the Capitals after coming over from Vegas, and 22-2-3 so far. And you don't really have a season that's better than that, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're peaking at the right time to get rewarded with the 6-year extension. Everything going well for the Washington Capitals, which is quite surprising because last year after they got bounced in the playoffs by the New York Rangers, I mean, they barely put up a fight. Now they're like the elite team of the NHL with Alexander Ovechkin going for Gretzky's goal record. Right now you got to be feeling good if you're a Washington Capitals fan because that was totally unexpected, and they kind of own the Metropolitan Division at the moment.
Yeah, they sure do. And again, his deal could turn out to be quite a bargain for the Capitals because, I mean, if looking at Shesterkin and some of the other numbers that are being thrown around, 11, 12, $13 million, I mean, his is about a 6-year, is about $6 million a year. Of course, I just lost the notes I had. But, that could turn out to be quite a bargain. I mean, you're not going to go 22-2-3 all the time, but, he was on the Vegas Golden Knights. He asked for a trade because he wanted more playing time, and now, as you said, he's kind of setting the world on fire with the Capitals.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and Devils news, obviously, speaking of goalies, Jacob Markstrom out with an injury, 4 to 6 weeks. Just a freak accident that happened. Jake the Snake Allen, is that's why the New Jersey Devils have him for that 1B. But really, Brendan in the YouTube Live says, let's take it easy. The defense has been slipping. Jake Allen can't bail us out all the time. Also, Joey B, also commenting that things are bad in Colorado in the Avalanche locker room versus management. And if Nathan McKinnon is mad, now speaking to me, when is he usually quiet? Sorry, I'm just reading out loud. I mean, you think there's a disconnect between the Avalanche locker room and management?
Well, if that's starting to leak out, that's certainly not good news. It's not, usually the teams try to keep that in house, but I mean, if you read, all you got to do is Google that trade, and you could see a lot of the players were very, very shocked.
Yeah,
that happened, and again, Sam, the big thing for me, I mean, what folks have to remember. And by the way, thank you to everybody for their questions. We appreciate them. We love when people take part in the podcast. What people have to realize is that more than anything else, this is a business. And yes, I think the management of these teams care about the games, and I think they care about the players, but what they care about most is making money. And that is the most important thing above everything in professional sports. But, if you have a player saying that he was willing to take significantly less to stay there, and that's coming out now, I'm not a fan of the Avalanche, but, if I was, I'd be like, well, what happened then? Especially, can you imagine, Sam, let's say that the number I had heard thrown around for Rantanen was $11.75 million. I saw that in a couple of places. So let's say that he signs a deal with the Hurricanes, an 8-year deal for $11. I mean, that's got to piss off the whole fan base, especially if that's underneath what they had set as an internal number. That just doesn't sound like that's a good situation to me.
And what do you think about how the players feel going to Colorado? That you're just filling in some big skates,
Well, not only are you filling in some big skates, but I mean, if you're moving someone that was that popular, and then the player comes out who doesn't seem, by all accounts, I don't know Mikko Rantanen from a hole in the wall, but he doesn't seem like one of those players that in the past had vented his thoughts about things like that in the media. For someone to come out and say, listen, this totally blindsided me. I had no idea this was going to happen. And I mean, that's pretty significant. And I mean, it could, listen, if they go on to win the Stanley Cup this year, winning fixes everything.
Yeah, but also I think that it might set up a potential Sidney Crosby trade as well. Which will help McKinnon, Nathan McKinnon, keep his mouth shut if that happens.
But again, if I'm the Penguins and this is my advice to Kyle Dubas, who is allegedly going to have a fire sale there, although that's been denied. Do not trade Sidney Crosby. Just don't do that. He should retire a Penguin. And I'm not a big Penguins fan. I'm not a big Sidney Crosby fan. But just like to me, and I don't know how you feel about this, but this is really the nicest way I can say that. I'll use the Marty analogy that we've talked about many times. Marty going to St. Louis is a blemish on the Devils organization. That never should have happened. And unless it's like a Ray Bourque thing. I mean, Sidney Crosby has Stanley Cups. It's not like a Ray Bourque thing where he's played forever and he's going to go to he's going to go to a team to get a cup because I don't know. I just think that's a terrible idea. But again, it's a business, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's a business, but to me, it's also your brand. And I think what happened with the New Jersey Devils is, look, if you just let Marty play out his career and take the losses, you would have had a very good chance, again, the top pick in the 2015 and 2016 drafts, which featured Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel 1 and 2, and then in 2016 you had Austin Matthews. But instead, you went with Corey Schneider with a bad team, and Marty left, played not even one season with the St. Louis Blues. It was kind of like, what was the point of that? Maybe it was something that he wanted to prove himself, or he wanted something post playing career. where he kind of went off to college to St. Louis before he came back. It still bothers me because it's also your brand as well. What other players would think years from now, being a forever New Jersey Devil or in Pittsburgh, a forever Penguin with Sidney Crosby. I mean, did you see Mario Lemieux leave for another team? No, you didn't. Now, you could say in other sports like Michael Jordan, the Washington Wizards, but I think he had some kind of ownership in that or some kind of opportunity, whatnot. But he's forever a Chicago Bull. But, it's just kind of weird, how that happened because, again, if you talk to the St. Louis Blues, you think that Marty Brodeur was there for years. He gets invited to the alumni tournaments. It makes no sense whatsoever.
And that whole thing too, Sam. I mean, if you look back at that, I mean, the way that's set up, I actually felt bad for Corey Schneider coming into that situation. I would feel bad for anybody coming into that situation because you could have been Jesus and you would have had an impossible task to follow, in my mind, the greatest goalie of all time. There's nobody that's going to come into that situation and have a good outcome. They're just not. The Devils were not a good team at that point. Corey did the best he could, but you're putting him in an untenable situation coming into that situation. But, I mean, it's happened with a whole bunch of players. I mean, let's look at the Rangers for a second. Do you think anybody cares about the 4 years that Mark Messier was with the Canucks? No. Nobody cares about that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you think the Rangers wish he had never left? I bet they do.
I don't know why they didn't offer him the money like they did with everybody else. There was no salary cap back then, which is kind of wild to me. So, but they had Wayne Gretzky. So, why wouldn't you want Mark Messier long term with, or at least a few years with Gretzky before he retired?
Because I think sometimes in organizations you have people looking only at the money. And again, I do wholeheartedly believe that it's all about the money all the time. That's literally the most important thing with professional sports. But I also do think in organizations you need some, whether it's hockey, football, baseball, you need some hockey people saying, listen, this is not a good idea for our brand. And on the other side, let's be honest too, because it takes both sides to come to an agreement. If I was Mark Messier's representation, I would say, listen, you don't want to go to Vancouver. And it even would have been different if he went back to Edmonton. But, do you think the highlight of his career is the 4 years he spent in Vancouver? No.
I'll tell you, as a Devils fan, I was so glad he was out of there. Because the whole guarantee. And you know what? Most people don't realize Messier made a lot of guarantees. Only one came through, and suddenly he's like a messiah. So, I still have newspaper clippings of, in the New York Post guaranteeing that the Rangers will make the playoffs. Didn't happen. It's sometimes, the press gets a little carried away with some of these guarantees.
You think?
Which originated with Joe Namath and the guarantee. But anyway.
I don't know. It's just when you look at some of these, things that come out and maybe it's speculation, maybe it's actually going to happen. But if I were advising Kyle Dubas, I would be like, do not do this. Do not do this.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right, Bruce. Well, it was good talking to you. We'll be back on Thursday. Yep, Thursday at the Point. Tomorrow we have Game Day Live and Devils After Dark, and also with the preemption of the State of the Fan Address. Probably will be also Thursday night as well, but that's to remain to be seen. We'll keep you posted on all of our social media outlets. But That's too loud. Sorry, Bruce.
That was loud.
I forgot we didn't intro with that music today. So
That's okay.
I had it up all the way, but here we go. Let's try again.
That's right. Well, we'll see what happens. And again, one of the things that I'm going to keep my fingers crossed is that Jacob Markstrom is back before we know it, and we'll see what happens.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we're going to get out of here. Dropping the podcast at midnight. Till next time, let's go Devils.